Hi, welcome to the Open Case channel. Today we bring you a new case for you. I hope you enjoy it. On February 29, 2000, John Price, 45 years old, a divorced man with 3 children, went to magistrates court to request a restraining order against his girlfriend Katherine Kelly, because after they refused to marry her, she began to harass him, in addition to the fact that they had already had more than one confrontation in which they had ended in multiple verbal and physical arguments. That same day, John contacted some of his colleagues from his new job and jokingly warned them that if he didn't show up to work, it was probably because something bad had happened to him. The next day John did not show up for work, which caused uncertainty regarding him, since they did not know if he was joking or something had actually happened to him. After some calls from his work boss, when he did not answer him, he decided to send one of your employees over to see if everything was okay. On the other hand, one of the neighbors was also concerned when he saw that John's vehicle was still parked in his parking lot, so he approached and knocked on his door repeatedly, but there was an abysmal silence. The neighbor looked through one of the bedroom windows to rule out that he had fallen asleep, but no one was inside, or at least no movement could be observed, until he managed to see some bloodstains near the entrance, and without hesitation, "Did you call the police?" In a matter of minutes, they were at the property. It was approximately 8 o'clock in the morning on the 1st of March. When they observed the house, they did not notice anything strange. However, to rule out any problem, they decided to force entry. Inside was what the same officers described as a disturbing, surprising, and unimaginable scenario. It was not difficult to find the material author of the event, since he was inside the house. Indeed, John knew that after meeting Katherine he would end up in her hands if someone did not stop him. The next case focuses on KATHERINE Knight, who became one of the most notorious murderers in Australian history. She was born on October 24, 1955 in Tenterfields, Australia, the daughter of Barbara Rowan and her father Kentonick. Previously Barbara was married to Jack Rowan and they lived in the city of Aberdeen, in New South Wales, where they had 4 children. However, an extramarital affair with Knight, who was a friend of her husband's, forced the marriage to separate. Barbara left her 4 children in the care of her ex-partner and went to live with her lover, who moved to the city of Mercia, where they formed a new family from which Katherine and her twin sister were born, as well as 2 more brothers. In 1959, Jack Rowan passed away and 2 of her children went to live with her. The environment where the minors grew up was not appropriate, since Ken was violent and abusive, in addition to having serious drinking problems, which led the man to repeatedly abusing Barbara and beating her children uncontrollably. Katherine's mother often used to talk to her daughters about her intimate life. The children not only witnessed those events, but Barbara told them in detail and explicitly everything he did to her, also expressing her rejection of the men. Subsequently, these behaviors were developed by Katherine's other siblings, who ended up abusing her on many occasions. After a while, after not taking it anymore, she told her mother about the situation she was going through, but far from understanding her and support her, he told her to stop complaining and to take what she had to deal with. This series of abuses ended until she was 11 years old. But she left an indelible mark that filled her with insecurity and mistrust, as well as great instability in all areas of her life, creating a lonely and violent personality at school. Katherine was short-tempered and used to defend the most vulnerable from others who intended to abuse them. This situation led her to constant fights that included some object to defend herself, until she reached the limit of attacking one of her classmates with a knife that she hid in her backpack. Despite the fight she had, she was a girl who behaved well inside the school classroom. However, she was withdrawn, and when she turned 15 she dropped out of school. She never learned to read or write. Once she stopped studying, she got her first job as a cutter in a clothing factory, where she lasted about 1 year. In 1971 she got a job at the Aberdeen slaughterhouse, where she acquired remarkable skills that led her to rise quickly, since she liked working with knives. She liked her work so much that she even mentioned that it was the job of her dreams, so much so that she hung her first set of butcher knives on her bed, and before going to sleep, he would look at them and that would give him enormous satisfaction. In 1973, Katherine's aggressive behavior began to come to light. That year she met her first husband, named David, 22, who worked for a railroad company and had recently been fired due to his problems with the drink. This led him to seek employment at the Aberdeen slaughterhouse, where he met Knight, who was about to turn 18, spent about 1 year, and after getting to know each other better, in 1974 they decided to unite their lives in marriage. The wedding night was memorable, because after they were intimate 3 times that night, David fell asleep and Katherine became enraged, because she considered that 3 times was very little. After feeling a fit of anger, she went over to her husband and tried to strangle him, but this would only be the beginning of a stormy relationship, as the couple starred in a series of violent events that were increasingly constant. The last fight they had was when Knight was almost at the end of her pregnancy. The discussion began after David arrived at her house later than usual, but far from asking him why he was late, she began to burn his clothes. Of her husband, she went to the kitchen and with a frying pan gave her a strong blow to the head that fractured her skull. Seeing the woman in such an aggressive state, she began to scream and ask for help. One of her neighbors heard her and called the police, who took Katherine away, but after a few hours she was released, since her husband did not want to file a complaint, because their daughter, whom they named Melissa N., would soon be born. In May 1976, David decided to leave Katherine because of her behavior. This caused him terrible frustration and depression that he ended up taking out on his daughter. One day, shortly after the separation, he left the cart where he was transporting his little girl. The train tracks with her inside. Fortunately, the baby was rescued by a man who was looking for food after he heard her cry and reported the fact to the police. Meanwhile, in the afternoon, when Katherine returned home, she took an axe from the backyard of one of her neighbors and took to the streets threatening passers-by who crossed her path, including an old man who reported her with the police, and minutes later she was arrested and taken to Tank Ward Psychiatric Hospital where she was diagnosed with postpartum depression and released. A few days later, she went out into the street with her baby in her arms, as well as a butcher knife, and threatened a woman to take her in her car to her husband's house. David, when he did not comply with her request, cut her face. On several occasions, and the victim managed to escape to a gas station, where she was helped by the staff who called the authorities, who arrived immediately and saw the woman screaming and waving a knife in the air with her baby in her arms, who looked horrified. After a few minutes, their daughter was brought to safety and she was taken to a psychiatric hospital. For treatment, the minor was placed in the care of her maternal grandparents, and her husband, David, was notified that Katherine was locked up in a psychiatric ward in the New South Wales mental institution and being sedated. On August 9, 1976, Katherine was placed in the care of her mother-in-law on the condition that she see to it that she took all her medication, and a couple of weeks later, Katherine and Dave moved back in together on Goodnight in Kesselring, where David drove lorries and Katherine took a job as a junkyard at the Demowar Meatworks in Ipswich. But the happiness only lasted a few days, and the reunion turned out to be more of the same, as the couple continued to be the protagonist of similar events, fight after fight that included attacks with all kinds of objects. However, despite the circumstances, on March 6, 1980 they had another daughter named Natasha. Years passed, and in 1984, when David Kelleff arrived home, he found the house empty, his wife and daughter gone, Katherine having moved in with her parents on a farm outside of Aberton and again got a job at the slaughterhouse. Her violent attitudes led to her not lasting long on the farm, and she soon moved with her daughters to a rented property. 1 year later, Michael Brooke began to feel severe back pain and had to stop working completely. She retired because of that and found her a home near her daughter's school. At 30 years old, tall, thin, and a whole life ahead of her, the only thing Katherine needed was a man. Her outward appearance was that of a happy and smiling woman. But deep down she was aggressive, jealous, and possessive. Her outward appearance gave her the chance to meet many men, including Dave Saunders, a 38-year-old miner who was considered a nice, handsome, and charming guy. The only problem he had was that he liked to drink. Even so, the couple hit it off immediately and got along very well in private. The relationship became more and more formal, and after a few months they decided to formalize the relationship and Dave moved into Katherine's apartment. However, those violent episodes didn't take long to come to light. She constantly accused Saunders of having an affair with other women. This accusation led the couple to argue for hours, until at a certain moment they kicked him out of their house, but as usual, the next day Katherine begged him to come back. It didn't take long for the fights to escalate until they ended in assaults. In May 1987, after an argument, he took a small puppy only a few months old and deprived him of his life in front of him, telling him that if it had happened that he had an affair with another woman, that would be what would happen to him. Despite the strong arguments and the strange behavior of Katherine, including an attempt to take his own life, In June 1988, she gave birth to her third daughter named Sarah. With the arrival of a new member of the family, they acquired a property, which was decorated with skulls of cows and sheep, animal skins and ox horns, among other things. There was a huge fork, a wooden spoon and a rake, traps for rusty animals, leather coats, and some motorcycle jackets. Katherine felt good about this decoration, but again the taste did not last long, since after a fight in which she hit her partner on the head with an iron and she stuck a pair of scissors into his chest, Dave decided that it was enough and he couldn't stand his wife anymore, so he asked for a vacation and left. When she tried to look for him, she couldn't find him and didn't know where he had gone. In desperation, she cut all his clothes to pieces and threw them in the landfill. Months later, Dave returned home to see his daughter, but was shocked that Katherine had gone to the police to mention that she was terrified of her husband and was afraid he would harm her, thus getting a restraining order.